General, it's been a week of airstrikes. On Friday, Vladimir Putin said that Russia had no plans, for now, for more massive airstrikes like those it carried out last week. He said currently there are other objectives for now, then we'll see. But this morning we've seen Kiev being attacked by kamikaze drones. What is behind his choice of targets?
The statement last week that he saw no need for further airstrikes, what he really means is that they're running low on cruise missiles, and he cannot replenish those cruise missiles. And probably his general staff was telling him that if he continued to do this, that Russia would end up defenseless against any potential attacker. So he realized that was a waste of ammunition. Using these kamikaze drones can still, he's still trying to achieve the effect of terrorizing innocent people and causing all of us to become anxious and to drag out the war. I mean, the target for these drones are innocent people, but also our willingness to support Ukraine. That's what this is about. Of course, it's going to fail, but it's a desperate measure that they're taking.
We've seen that, according to a U.S. government report, the Russian military has lost 6,000 pieces of equipment since invading Ukraine and have been expending munitions at a rate it cannot replace. Does Russia have the military power to continue this conflict?
They certainly have the ability to continue attacking innocent people, but their military does not have the capability, in my view, to conduct any offensive operations. The mobilization of thousands of people who don't want to be there has been very poorly managed, and the whole world has been able to see how terribly they're doing this, where they literally are grabbing people and impressing them into the military. So you can imagine the poor quality and the poor morale that these soldiers will have. But that is not a concern to the Kremlin. For the Kremlin, this is just about putting bodies there to try and extend the fight. So trading bodies for time, hoping that we in the West would be unwilling to continue supporting Ukraine. Fortunately, I don't see that as a likelihood. I think the West recognizes how important this is and that we will continue to support Ukraine.
Is the deal with Iran changing things right now?
Russia's only friends, the only people they're getting anything from are Iran and Belarus. Nobody else is supporting them, not China, not India, nobody. And so I think that they're desperate. Eventually, Ukraine will have received or developed capabilities to neutralize these Iranian drones. And of course, this will factor into our own negotiations with Iran. What sort of leverage do we have over Iran? What other means do we have to disrupt the flow of these drones?
You were talking about the support given by NATO countries to Ukraine. In the last week, we have seen yet again different promises of contributions from NATO allies for Ukraine. We are talking about counter-drone equipment, as you mentioned, air defense systems, artillery and armored vehicles. Also, about 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers will be embedded with military units in France. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg also said last week that over the longer term, NATO will also help Ukraine to transition from Soviet era to modern NATO equipment. What does Ukraine need right now from your point of view?
What the Ukrainians have said they needed are the ability to protect their civilian population from Russian missiles and drones. So air and missile defense is obviously the priority, but also they continue to need long-range precision fires that enable them to strike Russian logistics, Russian command and control, that will lead to the collapse of Russian forces. The Russians are only able to reinforce Crimea. They are trying to use ferries to move things across the Kerch Straits, but the weather is bad and high winds make it very difficult to transport heavy equipment on a ferry. And then, of course, the other so-called land bridge from north of Azov down into the Donetsk and Luhansk area. But that's under fire from Ukrainians. You don't have a good rail infrastructure there. So the Russians are in a difficult place, all because of their own choosing. And I think Ukraine is going to continue the pressure on them to include through the winter.
14 NATO countries and Finland signed the letter for the air defense systems last week. European Sky Shield Initiative. How fast do we need this kind of defense in Europe, and why do we need it right now?
Back when I was commander of U.S. Army Europe, I could see that we did not have adequate air and missile defense for Europe, for NATO. It just wasn't enough. And so this always gave me some concern. And now this year, after seeing that the Russians are using precision weapons against apartment buildings and shopping centers and schools and hospitals, significantly increases the requirement. It's not just about protecting airfields and seaports and critical infrastructure. It's about protecting hundreds of millions of European citizens. So our requirement for air and missile defense is significantly greater. And So I'm glad to see that Germany leading an initiative to create the Sky Shield. They're the logical framework nation to do this within a NATO and or EU context. One nation cannot defend itself. Romania cannot do it. Poland cannot do it. Germany cannot do it. You cannot defend yourself against attacks coming from multiple locations in Russia. You have to have a network of radar, sensors, airborne platforms, ground and air-based systems to shoot down incoming missiles, and the headquarters to be able to make the right decisions in time. And so imagine, what we're seeing right now is what you could expect if Russia ever made the decision to attack a NATO country, and that's certainly is not likely, but it's a possibility. They would not just send over one missile at a time. There would be dozens of them, like what we saw a couple of weeks ago in Ukraine, a mix of drones, cruise missiles, other types of weapons. So you need a system, a network. You need a network of systems that would have to be spread over Europe.
Thank you very much, General.